Okay. Have you spent the week thinking about Christian worship? Because that was our topic that we had last time from Romans chapter 12. As that's the place where we got in our study from Romans. And we were talking about that second verse especially. But we'll mention the first verse too, just read those again. Therefore, I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And I was focusing last time on the use of the term worship there. So often we use worship. If you looked at our screen earlier this morning, we had a worship service. And we use that term so often. That's when we get together. In our case, it's 9:30 on Sunday morning, and each church has a different time. But we were suggesting last time that, yes, we worship when we come together, but in a sense, what is that? Those meetings that we have are really the pep rallies or the team meetings preceding the worship that this verse is talking about. Sacrificing your body. You're using your bodies as a living sacrifice. So maybe we should call it worship service, but also pre-worship service. Because really that's the game. This is the team meeting, and everybody, knows the right things to say. We sing song, and that's great. But really the game is when you confront, how do you treat somebody during the week? How do you treat your family when you get out of here? How do you treat your co-workers? How do you treat your neighbors? How do you deal with those people that are in need on the street? And, how do you worship God in that context? So that kind of broadens the concept of worship, doesn't it? It's not just what you say at a meeting, it's what you do.
It's your whole life. It's how you live your life as an act of worship to God.
Yeah. So
it's interesting that the word sacrifice is used. It doesn't say, oh, and it's easy.
yeah. Your bodies as living sacrifices. Under the Jewish religion, other religion, they sacrificed animals and so on to God to show respect that God was the giver of those things and that he would bless you. And so he's using that term, offer your bodies as living sacrifices. How do you do that?
It means the things that you do
and
the way you respond to situations is not necessarily what you want to do.
Okay.
It's what you're called to do. You're acting as someone else's representative. I think of it in many ways as being like a representative for a company or something like that. Yeah. What you're doing, what you're saying isn't necessarily what you think or what you're feeling at the moment. It's what you're called upon to do in your job.
Yeah. I'll tell you a story that I've told before, but since there's some new people online in the room, I'll tell it again. It involves my in-laws. My wife's mother died a number of years ago, and then her father got remarried after a while to a lovely lady whose name was June. And they had many happy years of visiting their children and grandchildren. But finally, age began to catch up with Michelle's father, and he had all different problems. One was macular degeneration. He couldn't see to drive, so June had to drive him around wherever he went. He finally he couldn't really see to eat, so she had to cut up his food and get it on the spoon and the fork and so on. And finally, he was in the nursing home for a short period of time and passed away. And that was a loss. But just a few months later, June had a stroke and passed away herself. And after all of that, it came out that June hadn't really been taking very good care of herself. She had allowed her blood pressure to get out of control and, wasn't perhaps taking all the medicines and so on that she could have. And at her funeral service, the comment was made that, in a sense, she gave of herself to take care of her husband in his declining years. She might have done more to preserve her life, but the fellow that was preaching at the funeral service said, yeah, she may have been able to do more, but for what? For what? She saw it as her way of service to take care of her husband. For what? And so I've always, and some of you have heard that story before, but that's always been on my heart as an example of someone who gave themselves as a living sacrifice in worship to take care of someone else. In this case, it was her husband. And that question has haunted me. For what? The fellow used. For what? For what are you living? As some of us in the room are retired or mostly retired, and we like to think, well, I hope I have a long and healthy retirement. But then, though, because there's things I'd like to do. I'd like to travel. I'd like to see this or that or do this or that. Now I've got the time to do it. But those words that I heard at that funeral service kind of haunt me. For what? For what? Is that really the purpose for which God gives us health and strength and additional time just, to do what we want? Or is there someone that we should be serving? There's the church, there's family, there's, what should we be doing? For what do we want good health? For what do we want longer life? For what do we want all those things? Anyway, that's kind of what comes to my mind when we read, offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. So what are we doing? Anyway, this is your spiritual act of worship. That's how we worship God. And then he says, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world. What's the pattern of this world?
The examples we see lived out by people around us as opposed to the example of Christ.
And what do those examples say?
Look out for yourself.
Okay.
Before anyone else.
Yeah.
Trust only in your own intuition. Don't rely on the wisdom of religion.
The quality of your life is defined by how much money you make.
Yeah, grab as much as you can. That's a pattern of this world. Hang on to life at all costs.
Look out for number one.
Look out for number one. Don't do something that might, impinge upon your health or your life. For others, life is the ultimate goal, the ultimate pattern in a sense. But Jesus, he didn't live that long on this earth, and he gave himself as a living sacrifice for us. So that's a pattern. But be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And then the kind of a unusual phraseology, then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. The old translation says prove. This one translates it approve. What's he getting at there?
I think it's saying that in order to really understand God's will, your mind has to be in the right place.
Okay.
You have to be looking at things not from your own individual point of view, but you have to try to see it from God's point of view.
Yeah, approve what God's will is, or prove what God's will is. It suggests to me, put it into practice and see. You prove God's will by living and seeing that if I live in conformity with God's will, things are better. The Lord says, promises blessings to those who give. It's more blessed to give than to receive, we read. And I think this verse is saying, put that into practice and you'll see that the blessings come from giving. When you give of yourself in various ways. You may not have the biggest mansion in the world or whatever, but you're blessed in so many ways. So that's, and transform. You go after different things. You think about different things. Your objectives are different. Your objectives, in a sense, become service. Instead of triggering in your mind the things of the world are designed by those who advertise to appeal to us. But if our mind is transformed, our minds are filled not with the attractiveness of things, but by needs and things we can do for others. It takes practice to see those things. He's going to talk about that later. It takes practice to be aware of what other people are thinking and what they're doing, because we're usually thinking about ourselves. But we'll get to this. Some people are and we'll get to that because he's going to talk about people with different spiritual blessings as we go on. And some people just seem to have that blessing of knowing what other people need, what they enjoy. Anyway, we'll get to that. Any other comments on these couple of verses? It's a different concept of worship anyway, to me.
I think one of the most important things about transforming your mind is it trains your conscience, trains your intuition. Your gut reaction is more accurate. Whenever you first become a Christian or whenever you're struggling with something, your gut reaction is often wrong.
Yeah.
Your gut reaction is to get mad at something. Your gut reaction is to retaliate. Your gut reaction is to, oh, I'm not doing good enough at my job. I need to take time away from all these other things I'm helping people with and focus more on my job. Whereas when you train yourself, in the Bible a little more, your gut reaction is whenever somebody is being unkind to you, your gut reaction isn't necessarily to get mad at them and immediately try to fight back. Your gut reaction actually is to love them a little more and just wonder what's wrong with them. And this is you know, you're angry, you're suppressing it, and you're choosing to do that, it's your instinctual reaction. That only happens after you trained yourself and transformed.
Yeah.
Favorite
And
one.
I think that's a
it-
really good point. Sorry, and you know, to me, when I think about being, you know, don't be conformed. Conformed is when things are happening to you. You know, you get conformed because of the pressure that's on you, as compared to being transformed. When you're doing things, you're being proactive. It's self. I think that was Josh that was speaking. But yeah, you're training and building yourself up, and that's how I compare conformed and transformed, as being something being done to you versus you proactively doing something for yourself.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. That instead of being buffeted by circumstances, with God's help, we can kind of take control. And as you mature, it becomes more gracious. Maybe you've reacted, you know, something happens and you know, I shouldn't get mad, but you kind of growl and you control yourself. I've seen that happen to people where, you know, I can see there's a bad and they get control of themselves, but you know, the bad with it. But over time, if we train our reactions, it becomes more gracious. And so that our first response is not anger but is consideration for others. That's a good point. And we kind of take control of the situation, as Steve said, rather than being controlled. So anyway, we're still on the first 2 chapters of Romans 12.
Okay.
But we're ready to move on.
Well, I did this.
We were waiting for you, Dan.
That's right.
I know I gotta find out where we leave off. Trying
Yeah.
to follow his footsteps next week.
Yeah, my
Big
family and I will
big,
be
big speak.
at a kind of a family gathering elsewhere in actually in Florida. So
Wow.
But, anyway. So this introductory couple of verses is kind of summarizing what he's going to be talking about in more specific next several chapters. We've said that Romans 12 begins with a therefore, based upon the theological discussion of the first, what we know as the first 11 chapters, which could be summarized very succinctly by salvation by faith. Salvation is a gift of God, and we have faith and obey and so on. But anyway, so that now he's going to go on and kind of discuss, what does that mean? What life has been saved by faith, saved by God, saved through faith. For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the measure of faith God has given. We live in an age when self-esteem is an important thing that we teach. And what came to my mind, do you think we have more of a problem that we think too highly of ourselves, or we think not highly enough of ourselves?
Well, society is teaching us to think highly of ourselves. I
Okay.
think all the psychologists out there, you know, the culture.
And maybe not everyone is the same. You know, we try to inculcate in young people, you know, think of yourself as someone who can accomplish something, that you have talents and abilities. But on the other hand, there's that temptation always to think too highly of self. And he's bringing that out here. Do not think of yourself more highly than you ought. How high should it be? Is it more highly?
It's kind of like love. Right, we love ourselves, but the Bible emphasizes we love other people more. So there's
Okay.
gotta be a kind of a middle ground there, tipping point, somewhere in the middle. So, it's kind of the same thing here. You gotta have some, but emphasis should be more outward.
Well, if you're going to think of yourself, or if you're going to offer yourself as a living sacrifice, then you're going to be thinking of others more highly than yourself. Isn't there a verse somewhere?
Well, we're gonna get to it later.
Um,
The old translation says, in honor preferring one another. We'll see what this, which is hard to
But
do.
is that almost like saying no one's perfect?
Well, that's right. That's one thing that through sober judgment, think of yourself with sober judgment. In other words, take stock of yourself. Have the courage to look at your life, not with the flattery is common, but honestly, Dan, that's one of your catchphrases that I never forget. The unexamined life.
I think that's true. I think the Bible kind of backs that up. Different places.
Unexamined life. Do we have the courage to examine our lives and say to God, I've examined my life, God, and I've found that it's not what it should be in certain areas. Help me. That's part of prayer, is confession. But a sober judgment, now he goes on in this verse, in accordance with the measure of faith God has given you. Interesting. Just as each of us has one body with many members, and these members do not all have the same function. So in Christ, we who are many make one body, and each member belongs to all the others. What does that have to do with sober judgment? Anything? It suggests to me that in the sober judgment, we need to assess our talents. It's easy to say, I have no talent, I have no training, there's nothing I can do for God. But sober judgment says, I want to look at my life and see what I can do. Not everyone in sober judgment will say, I'm the guy that's going to stand up and preach every Sunday morning, or I'm the one who's going to be the leader of the ladies' Bible class and work of ministry.
Or song leader.
Or song leader.
Everybody's set out to be a song leader. We know that.
That's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
But that's part of the sober judgment, isn't it? To look at and see how things fit together. And that we all have been given some abilities. And that's what he's going to go into here. The gifts that we have and how they complement each other in the church. So, and some of these are kind of surprising. So, in Christ we are made from one body. We have different gifts according to the grace given us. Some people can speak glibly, others not so much. But anyway, and let him use it according to the grace given us. Let him use it in proportion to his faith. Use what you got for God. If it is serving, let him serve. So here's some gifts. Gift of serving.
I think we all have that.
Do we all?
To some extent, some are better at it than others.
We all have it to some extent, but maybe we serve in different ways. Some serve by cooking good meals for their family, for the church. I mean, there's all kinds of service. Some serve by fixing cars. Some serve, you know, what, some serve by dispensing postage, some serve by, I don't know what you do, teaching. So, and anyway.
It says, Alan, we have different gifts according to the grace given us. Is it God who determines how much great, I don't, is he giving it to us based on what we can handle, or how would that,
I think
why would we get different measures of grace?
that's a good question,
we do.
isn't it? Why, like Dan said, talk about song leader, why can some people hold a note and
I
other
know, right?
people?
Because it's a gift. God,
It's a gift.
music is a type of intelligence.
Well,
It's a special type of intelligence, and some of us have more than others. God gives it, God gives it, that's it.
okay,
You can't develop somebody who's monotone, for instance, my mother was monotone. She could not carry one note, couldn't carry a bucket. She never knew how to sing. If she tried, she was a good pianist too. She could play music, but she could not sing. And that's just the way she was, you know.
she was, you know, a graduate of Western University and had a lot.
She was
She couldn't sing, but she could.
valedictorian of her class, second in her class.
Yeah.
But she could not sing a note. It's just, God did not give her that ability.
Different abilities, and that's the thing to say, because I can't do one thing, I can't do anything. Because I can't do the thing that gets so much attention, this, you know, I'm not as good as other people, because my talent is not as showy, if you will. Paul's deals with that in Corinthians more especially, but anyway. Serving, let him serve. Here's some others. If it is teaching, let him teach. Some people can teach classes. Some people more comfortable teaching one-on-one individual. Some people have difficulty at all. My father was a deacon here at the church for, I don't know how
30
many
years.
50 years or something. You know how many classes he taught? One. He wasn't, he was asked to teach a class one time, and it made him very, very nervous. He spent a lot of time in preparation. That just wasn't his thing.
I think your mother told him to sit down. She was a teacher. My mother was
But he was-
She was my teacher.
But I learned a lot
That's the
from him.
difference.
I lived with him, you know, and learned a lot. He was a man who would.
Plus,
who
he
believed
fixed everything in the building.
He took care of the building, and that was one thing. He would take anything apart and put it back, you know, he could figure things
mechanical.
out like that. And so what he taught me is, don't ever, you know, think that there's something you can't do. You know, you can do it if you try and put your mind to it, among other lessons. But he wasn't a public teacher anyway. And some people have that. If it is encouraging, we don't usually think of that as a gift, and we all are encouraged, but some people just have that ability to say the right thing at the right time. And you have that sensitivity to say just what somebody needs if you're feeling down. It's a gift, he's saying. Maybe all of us have it to a certain extent, but others have it kind of more than others. It's something to be developed, yeah. If it is contributing to the needs of others, let him give generously. I mean, we can all do that, but some people have more opportunity, more assets to do different things, you know. Those are different gifts. Let him, if it is leadership, not everybody is a leader. Some, you know, some function more in a supporting role. I had a boss that said one time, you know, don't feel bad if you're not striving to be the president of the corporation because we have need of good tax attorneys. And anyway, some are leaders, some are not. Let him govern diligently. If it is showing mercy, let him do it cheerfully. Again, we need to be merciful, but some people just seem to have that ability to offer a forgiveness in a way that is especially meaningful. I don't know.
Maybe they've been shown more mercy.
Yeah,
That's usually
okay,
what it is. They're
yeah.
sensitive to it,
okay.
you know.
Excuse me, but when you say showing mercy, what does that really mean? Showing mercy.
Showing mercy, well, let's look at a verse. I was just gonna say that one of the commentators cited some verses from Matthew chapter 25 in connection with this verse. Matthew 25 verses 35 and 36. So thanks, Darlena, for that transition. What does it say here? This is Jesus near the end of his ministry. So I can get the right page. Matthew 25. Okay. I can read it here. He said, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. That's part of mercy, isn't it?
Yes.
Giving to people who have need that nobody else is looking after.
Okay.
And Darlena, the way I think about it, or the way I was taught in college, is if you think about grace, grace is when you receive a blessing when you don't deserve it. And mercy is when you don't receive punishment, maybe when you do deserve it. And so when I think about, being giving mercy to somebody, it's like, giving them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they've harmed you or said something to hurt your feelings, and you let it go and just show them love in any way. So that's how I think about it, in the difference between grace and mercy.
Good way of saying it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So it's a listing of different skills, if you will, spiritual skills. And we all have something to offer. I remember a few years ago, we were talking about, what the yellow pages are that people don't know anymore.
It's just old. I still use it. I have an old copy. I still use it.
That's where you could look up the phone number and call people with the skill that you needed. If your car wouldn't start, you could call a mechanic, or if your roof was leaking, you could call somebody. I remember we talked about at one point, wouldn't it be great if we had a yellow pages of the church, a yellow pages of Christians, so that if you had a need, you could look at a Christian who had the particular skill that you needed and call upon them. And it would require some sober judgment, as we looked at earlier, that each person would kind of look at their skills and see, maybe I have a skill. If you need someone to look after your kid, your children, call so-and-so. If you need someone to drive you to the hospital for your treatment, call so-and-so. If you need someone to help you move, call so-and-so. If you
Have a leaky toilet.
What's that?
Have a leaky toilet.
But that's kind of what we're talking about. We have various skills in the church, And it would be great if we could call on one another to meet the needs of our lives. If we, maybe we need to call someone and say, I'm being tempted right now by lust. I'm being tempted right now to be angry or to be bitter. And somebody was willing to talk to me, like in Alcoholics Anonymous, if you're tempted, they got somebody you can call. And wouldn't it be great in the church if we had these skills and could call on one another? Some, kind of mundane thing, like I say, I'm stuck, come pick me up. Others more spiritual. I'm being tempted now. Help me.
Well, I think in the church, usually a certain amount of that does go on. I know Patrick, I'm sure you calls, right? And that's usually where it's focused, at your house or the elder's house, we get calls from people that need help now and then. And we usually know the congregation well enough where we can recommend somebody, if we have somebody that has a certain talent. So I think we have kind of an informal yellow pages, you might say, but it's probably not worth all the time and effort to put it in print, that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
But, the elders and the leadership here knows if they're doing their job, they know the congregation well, and they know who you can call on and who you can,
I guess there's a gift of being able to deal with complaints because like Dan said, people, if somebody has a complaint, they figure out somebody to call, but
Yeah.
that's a blessing too, to help someone get through something like that. But that's, again, what he's talking about, offering your bodies as living sacrifices. And this is how you deal with one another if you're saved by faith. So.
And if you're busy serving, there's not much time to complain.
What's that?
If you're busy serving, there's not much time to complain.
That's another good point. Not much time left for complaining if we're busy praying for and trying to lead others to Jesus. So,
Sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say one more observation, and I think, you asked a question earlier in class when we first started reading this. What's he talking about here when he says, think of yourself with sober judgment? I was kind of pondering over that, because what he's doing there is he's contrasting, what he's saying, talking about sober judgment, he's evaluating what your own abilities are, it seems like. What sort of things you can do. And he's contrasting that with thinking too highly of yourself.
Okay.
And I was trying to figure out, why is that a contrast? And I think maybe it helps to think about it in context of, this is Paul writing, the same one who wrote 1 Corinthians 12-14, where there were people there, right? Everybody wanted to be able to speak in tongues, right? Not everybody wanted that, right? Because that was seen as the great thing.
Yeah.
And it seems like, especially in the context of, talking about living sacrifice, offering your bodies as sacrifice, evaluating yourself humbly with sober judgment. Maybe what he's saying there is, don't try to force yourself to do these things you see as more fancy, it's a higher calling in the church, but instead just evaluate what you can actually do.
Okay.
Because no matter what it is you do, it's still important, even if it's not as flashy as some of these other things.
Right.
Maybe that helps.
That's right. That's a good point. Not too highly.
He's calling us to go deeper, I think, basically, there's so much superficiality out here, it's in the church sometimes you see it, and it's out in society and culture and all this stuff. But God and Paul here is calling us to go deeper in your thinking and in your life, all these concepts, right, are calling us to go deeper into Christ, deeper into serving other people. So that's what it's all about, I guess.
Okay, well, verse 9, love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Love must be sincere. Is love ever not sincere? You think? We say we love everybody, maybe, but we tell someone we love you if somebody, we love you, I hope your problem is solved,
I know.
but what do we do?
Be
To
warm
help.
and feel.
Jesus used it, be filled, go and be filled. I hope you have enough to eat, but I didn't give you anything, We talk about love.
Love is also sometimes can be conditional. Like, I'll love you as long as you do this or you don't do this, but if you do that, then the love isn't necessarily there.
To the world, love is, something that happens to you. You fall in love. The love that he's talking about is a decision to love and a decision to put it into practice.
It's a behavior, not a feeling.
Yeah, okay, that's a good way.
Might be mad at that person, but you love them by
Yeah.
taking care of whatever they need from you at that time.
Like our children sometimes.
Yeah.
But we still
You love those little jokers for you.
want the best for them. Love must be sincere.
Mhm.
And I think he sees that in the church, that there's that possibility that they'll talk a good game of love, but it will not be put into practice. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Hate what is evil. What the tendency there sometimes is, we want to get as close to the bed without falling over the edge, if you will. He said, stay away. How do you do that? We can say, well, don't go to places where you're gonna be tempted. How can you? What is even? It involves controlling thoughts ultimately, isn't it?
Mhm.
And the easy thing is to just, well, my thoughts are my own. I'm gonna let them go wherever they go. But a disciplined person says, it's in control of thought. Just as we're in control of our feet, we may not want to go. We say, I'm thinking, and I don't want to think along that line because it's worry. I don't want to worry. I need to have more trust in God, so I'm not going to worry. Or I'm thinking of somebody who's done something bad to me. And sometimes you just have to say, I'm not going to think about that because it's leading to hatred and bitterness. There's other areas. I'm not going to think of something because it's dishonest, it's lustful, it's whatever. It takes a lot of discipline to control thoughts. But God will help. God will help if you ask him, Father, I don't want to think about that. maybe get you bound in something else. And if you think that's what here's what we talked about earlier. Honor one another above yourselves, or be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Honor one another above yourselves. In the old version says, in honor preferring one another. That's hard to say, to prefer that somebody else get the honor rather than you. If somebody else got the promotion at work, but that's part of loving one another. Being glad when good happens to someone. Is that what he's talking about? Honor preferring one another. Honor one another above yourselves. That's humility. But never losing sight of the fact that God loves you. And it kind of suggests that the natural tendency of people is to think too highly of themselves. Anyway, Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord.
Don't go through the motions.
Don't what?
Don't just go through the motions.
Okay, yeah. But zeal, that means you kind of maintain an excitement for serving the Lord.
The note here, it means eager enthusiasm,
Yeah.
try to
We
maintain that.
kind of have our ups and downs, but it's kind of suggesting here, sometimes you just have to make a decision. I'm going to get excited about this work. Because there's a reason for that. You know, these things have eternal consequences. These things are not just some things we do, they have consequences that go beyond this life. And that kind of helps us to maintain fervor. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with God's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. So those are kind of definitions of love. And you'll be blessed by sharing with God's people, practicing hospitality. Just on that last point, it makes such a big difference when you have people in your home. And that's hospitality, you can do it in different ways, but that's one way. You just feel that if you have that association with someone, you'll feel close to them for the rest of your life, closer than you would if you didn't do that. Just, have someone in your home one time, someone visit, to have a meal together, you feel closer to those people than you otherwise would. And, it seems such a little thing. I know to those who cook and prepare and clean up, it's a big thing, but it doesn't seem like that big a thing, but it can really cement relationships in so many ways.
I think that's been one of the hardest parts of COVID for us.
Oh, boy,
Not being
really?
able to, like you were scared to have someone from
Yeah,
outside your home.
how do you do that? How do you do that? That's one of, kind of, everybody's alone in their own little silo.
People are trying to get together now.
Right.
Gotta take
I know. I feel
precautions,
like it's better now, but.
If everybody's vaccinated,
I mean, there was always email and all these other.
Zoom, I'm
Zoom.
trying to hate Zoom. Constantly looking at yourself.
It's not the same as being in the
That's
same
right.
room as.
That's
No.
right. That's right. So there were some special temptations. Okay, we'll call it at verse
Eager beaver
14, Dan.
All right, we'll carry on next week there,
Okay, thank you.
Lord willing.
And those who are traveling, have